Good morning, St. Luke's. It is July 5th, and we have been sheltering in place for 16 weeks. How do you respond to rejection? How do you respond when somebody really doesn't appreciate you? Or maybe worse, what if someone is hostile toward you? Well, if you're anything like Jesus' disciples, you won't respond well. Because in our text this morning, they have a burning desire to get even. They want to pay back, and they want to force those who oppose them to respect them. That doesn't work, Jesus taught. Let me show you another way. A reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, verse 51. When the days drew near for Jesus to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent his messengers ahead of him. And on their way, they entered a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. But they did not receive him, because his face was set toward Jerusalem. And when his disciples James and John saw it, they said, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" But he turned and he rebuked them, and they went on to another village. The Gospel of the Lord. So, when was the last time you were angry? Can you remember? And what made you angry? Now, for some of you, that's going to be really easy because it's going to be today sometime, or last night, or yesterday. And for others, that might be a little bit harder. But Jesus spent quite a bit of time talking about or teaching about anger. Maybe because it's such a powerful emotion, and maybe because it can guide us and motivate us in either very helpful ways or extremely destructive ways. You know, some of us have a very, very short fuse, and for some people, you know when they're angry because they'll be talking to you about it, and they'll be telling you, and they'll be very verbal, and they'll be out there, and they'll be very expressive. And it could be anything that sets them off. It could be a person or a circumstance or the news or the state of the world or the way our leaders are leading. And then other people, it's not that they don't have anger, but they might not express it the same way. At least they don't express it directly, right? They might just simply withdraw, and you never see them for a long, long time. So we all have different ways of either expressing it or not, but everybody has anger. Everyone has it. And one of the things that Jesus teaches us is that feeling anger isn't wrong. Feeling anger is being human. It's more about what we do with the anger. That's where we run into trouble. What we actually do with the anger. Now, Jesus had people angry at him all the time. He had very powerful enemies. He was constantly being criticized. Constantly. When you read through the Gospels, the first 4 books, you will find Jesus in conversation with the religious leaders, and they are angry most of the time. Most of the time when he's speaking to the religious leaders, they are criticizing him. And so when you look at the way he responds, it's interesting because sometimes he does things differently all the time. There's no one set way. For example, when he's criticized, sometimes he'll say things like, he'll give advice, and he'll say, take the plank out your own eye before you judge the situation. Or sometimes he'll just withdraw. He will not engage with someone who's angry. He will just withdraw. Sometimes he'll pause, and he'll wait a long, long time before he actually speaks. Sometimes he will calmly explain his actions. Sometimes he will confront someone with truth and speak out the truth, even though it's going to be highly controversial. Which tells us that every situation is so very, very different. So every time he was criticized, he would deal with the particular person in a different way, because different things were needed for different people. But one thing you'll notice with Jesus is that he's not reactive, and his anger is never out of control, nor is it destructive. Which is what we find with James and John this morning, who are extremely angry. They have been rejected, they are personally offended, and they want sweet revenge. They want sweet revenge. They want to get even. And so they ask Jesus if they can call fire down from heaven to destroy their enemies, which of course is highly dramatic. It's like, what are you thinking? What were they thinking? I don't know. Maybe they're thinking, well, since Jesus is a healer, and since he has a lot of power, and since we've seen his miracles, and a lot of these things can't be explained, maybe he'll show us, how to use God's power to silence the people that don't like us. Maybe he'll show us to somehow ways to tap into God's power so that we can shut up our enemies and power over them. And of course, powering over is not something that Jesus modeled nor practiced. He never used power in that way, although it's often humanity's first response to any kind of rejection is to power over. So here's the background of this passage. We're in Luke 9, and the passage tells us that Jesus is traveling toward Jerusalem. It uses the phrase in 51 that he set his face, which is a way of saying that he's purposeful, is a purposeful going toward Jerusalem. He's determined, he's focused. On his way to Jerusalem, he enters a Samaritan village. And the background is, with the ancient Jews and the ancient Samaritans, there's a lot of racial tension between these two groups, and there has been for hundreds of years. There's religious tension, there's racial tension. There's hundreds of years of history of antagonism. So you can imagine it doesn't take much to set people off, right? So they're going through the Samaritan village, and for some reason or another, and the text doesn't give any details, it just says that the Samaritans don't receive him. So there's no hospitality. We have no idea why, but they are not warmly welcomed. And James and John are extremely offended by this rejection. Now, it's not terribly surprising that they're not met with hospitality because, like I said, they've been enemies for hundreds of years. They've got all this tension. I'm not even sure why James and John would expect them to be warmly welcomed. But when they are not welcomed and they're rejected, James and John are furious, and that's where we get that line, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? They want their enemies gone. Whatever it takes, get these people out of our lives. Whatever it takes. There's the energy. Now, where did they get the idea of calling down fire from heaven? Well, possibly from the ancient prophet Elijah, who hundreds of years previous to this actually called fire down from heaven on the enemies. And so James and John are probably thinking, hey, if Elijah did it all those hundreds of years ago, maybe Jesus can teach us how to do the same thing. And Jesus obviously has another way, because he rebuked them. He rebuked them. Verse 55. And rebuked is a very strong word in the original language. It's a very powerfully strong word. So he's rebuking, as in violence is set aside as a solution. So he has this whole other new way of doing life, because that was the normal way of doing things in the ancient world, as it often is today. So the thing is that this is a new thought for me. Jesus never really expected the disciples to be warmly welcomed everywhere they went. Jesus never expected that he himself would be warmly welcomed and embraced wherever he went. And so he's already told the disciples, he's given them instruction on how he wants them to respond when people don't approve or like or reject what they have to offer. And what he's already told them is, he's already given them this instruction: I want you to learn how to shake the dust off your feet, which is an interesting phrase, and you can kind of imagine what it actually means. You know, if you're shaking the dust off your feet, it's like you're just shaking it off. You know, you're leaving it behind. It's like, I've told you, James and John, I've told you, when you feel rejected, don't let other people define you. You shake the dust off your feet and you move on. Now, James and John and all the disciples, truth be told, all of us down throughout the centuries, you know, we have a lot to learn about anger. A lot. We have a lot to learn about how to use our anger well. Jesus always raises the bar. If the teaching of Jesus sounds manageable, it's probably not the full understanding of Jesus' teaching. Because when you really start to get to the heart of the matter of Jesus' teaching, it always makes you squirm a little bit, because it invariably makes you feel terribly inadequate. Jesus did a lot of teaching on anger in Matthew 5. He said things like, "You've heard it said, do not murder. But I say, whoever is angry with a brother or sister is subject to judgment." So it's like, there he goes. He always raises the bar. Jesus is teaching, you've heard it said, do not murder. It's not just about murder. It's about even harboring anger toward someone. You've heard it said, do not murder, but I say, raises the bar, whoever is angry with a brother or sister is subject to judgment. It's like, you think you're okay because you don't murder? No, that's not okay. Have you ever been angry? Have you ever been angry? Well, yeah. Okay, you're in dangerous territory from that point on. And again, there's a subtlety here. It's not so much that all anger is wrong. It's more how we deal with the energy of anger. Because it is an energy, right? There's helpful anger. There's destructive anger. The natural inclination is always to move toward the destructive anger first. Naturally. Good anger, or let's say helpful anger, would alert you to the fact that something's wrong. This would be good, helpful, purposeful anger. It alerts you to the fact that something's wrong. It alerts you to the fact that something is dangerous, or something is unjust, or something needs to change. It could be you in a relationship within you, a family setting. I don't want to live this way anymore. It leads to action. It leads to good change. It makes the relationship stronger. I don't want us as a family to live this way. We have to make some changes, or I can't be here. We have to become a healthier family. It's anger that's motivated by protecting people. It's anger, good anger is motivated by protecting people. Helpful anger is motivated by honoring people. It's respecting people. This relationship is important to me. I want to do whatever I can to better it or save it. Destructive anger, actually, it's the anger of personal insult, which is what James and John model here. The disciples are personally offended. to the point where they want to have some sort of revenge and get even. This is the anger that Jesus warns against. The anger that comes from personal insult. Which is actually so common when you think about it, because this idea of the secret desire for satisfaction that people have, you see it all the time. You see it in, many times you'll see it in divorced couples or couples that have been together and have broken up. It's like, but he caused me so much pain, or she caused me so much pain. And that might be true. That may well be true. But Jesus is saying there's another way to deal with pain and rejection. Why do some couples use their kids as pawns to get even, with the other spouse in some way, with the ex-spouse? Why would you do that? Why would anybody do that? Well, it's because they feel wronged, because they feel rejected, because they've got anger. Jesus is saying there's other ways to deal with this. Why do people gossip and pass on information that might not even be true? Why do people constantly criticize all the time? Why? There's anger there. It's not dealt with. It's festering, it's coming out in these unhelpful ways. Yeah, unhappy people cause unhappiness for others. That's just the way it is. Jesus' teaching, the answer, is not found by giving back what you get. If it worked, there'd be peace in the world, right? There'd be peace in the world if it worked. So Jesus' teaching is the answer is not found by giving back what you get. It involves a whole other new way of living and being. It's almost like, there's many ways to talk about this, but it's almost like, how about using hurt and rejection and disappointment as an opportunity to learn how to trust God in a deeper way and learn how to let go and receive healing. How about learning how to receive from the one who won't disappoint, who won't reject, who won't criticize? How about using all that hurt in an entirely different way? See, the disciples want to get even because they can't control the situation. And when we can't control the situation, it drives us crazy. They can't control the Samaritans, and when they feel out of control, that can make the disciples and us, it can drive us to do and say things that we normally wouldn't do. So rather than allow all that angry energy to take over and rule over us, how about learning how to release that into God's care? Now, here's another way of approaching this teaching. If anger and control isn't the answer, if it's not the solution, it might be helpful to ponder, okay, what would happen if I didn't respond in anger? What would happen? If Jesus is teaching that destructive anger is not helpful in influencing me, if he's teaching me that, what would change if I didn't go in that direction? What would change if I didn't go in that direction? What if, by the help of God, I didn't control this situation, or try to, or this person, or whatever it is that feels chaotic? I mean, as a prayerful question brought before God over time, would that change the way I behave, and would it change what I decide to do? Well, one thing's for sure is our response wouldn't be reactive. That's the first thing that would happen. If we step back and we listen to Jesus' teaching and we just practice just that one thing of waiting and praying and not allowing that destructive kind of energy to lead us, the first thing that would happen is our response wouldn't be reactive, which Jesus never had a reactive response. It was always proactive. Now, obviously, that would take a lot of practice and it would take a lot of time because, like James and John, we tend to be programmed for quick reaction and impulsive response. And if you're anything like me, you'll know that an impulsive response is often regretted, right? It's often regretted. So getting even and paying back, the personal insult that James and John are modeling here, that's always reactive, always. But rather, Jesus has another way, a proactive way of living in the world. Shake the dust off your feet, move on, don't let others define you. Don't let others define you, James and John. We have important things to do. James and John, you're about the work of the kingdom. There are more important things to do than defending yourself and trying to call fire down from heaven. There's more important things to do in the world, right? Don't waste your time there. Let's go. Don't waste your energy defending yourself and proving to the world or blaming or resenting. Don't waste your energy doing that. You don't want to do that. Hating, disliking, move on. Shake the dust off your feet. We've got better things to do. All unnecessary, all unhelpful. It's like, so many good lessons in this for us today, isn't there? It's like, you feeling rejected? You feeling undervalued? Maybe you are. Shake the dust off your feet. He's reminding James and John that they're not victims. He's reminding them, he's empowering them to live another way. I think it's a great reminder for us. I think it's a great reminder for us to keep the faith and stay on track and not get distracted. It's like we have an important task. I think now more than ever, the world desperately needs Christ. And I know that we've always believed that as followers. We've always believed that it's the most important thing to go out and make disciples, to teach the students. But I think now more than ever we can see the chaos of the world and the fear in the world, and we can see the people like sheep without a shepherd, more than ever. So at this point in history, at this point in time, it's even more important for us to keep the faith and stay on track and not get distracted and contribute in the way that we're called to contribute. Because we're all called to contribute in different ways, but we're all moving in the same direction. Wonderful, wonderful lesson that we can learn. The same lesson as James and John. Amen.
Forgiven is
No, I didn't forget it. It's here. Want to thank everyone for sending in your offering. Want to thank everyone for getting in touch with your bank, and your bank sends us your offering. For those of you who slip it through the mailbox, thank you. Every single one of you, thank you for your faithfulness at this time.